don't think too hard about branding yourself. Like there was a lot of periods where people were like, well, who are you? What are you doing? The more films you make, the more your voice comes out, learning and experimenting and really pushing, like just, have fun and make films and tell stories.
This episode is sponsored by Pelleplat and Craftsman Films. Welcome to Off the Lot. We're very excited about today's guest, who we've been trying to get on the show for quite some time, and her schedule has finally opened up. Karen Lam is an award-winning writer, director, and former entertainment lawyer who has worked full-time in film and television since 2000. She has written and directed 10 short films, 5 feature films, and multiple television series. Her acclaimed horror feature, The Curse of Willow Song, premiered at VIFF in 2020, winning Best British Columbia Film, with Karen taking home Best Director at the Leo Awards. Her other films include Stained 2010 and Evangeline 2013. For television, she has written for Sci-Fi and Netflix series including Van Helsing and Ghost Wars, and she directed the true crime docuseries Very Bad Men for Investigation Discovery. In 2022, she directed Bring It On, Cheer or Die, a Halloween horror spin-off on the cheerleading franchise, and that premiered on Sci-Fi and is now streaming globally. In 2024, Karen directed 2 projects based on her original scripts, Mrs. Chang's Perfect Teeth, a short horror film that won the DGC BC Greenlight Award. We definitely have to talk about that. And it premiered at the 2024 DGC Spotlight, and Armageddon Road, a darkly comic supernatural feature set in 1970s Las Vegas, inspired by the Book of Revelation. She shot it using miniatures and volume wall technology. Armageddon Road is now in post and set for completion in late summer 2025. Karen, welcome to Off the Lot.
Oh, thanks, Van. Well, thanks for having me here, and thanks for your patience. I'm so sorry I kept, the scheduling thing. It was the vortex of my life.
Well, it totally makes sense that you couldn't join us because you were making a movie that we're now going to talk about today. I'm very excited to talk about Armageddon Road and dive into all of that. You shot it last summer, right?
I did. As we both know, for making our DGC, you were making me actually feel very guilty because you were like, when I kept watching you on socials, with the Duke of War, and you were already done, and I was still on Armageddon Road, and I just felt like the walls of Star Wars closing in on me, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to, because, again, the riches of shooting 2 things back to back. So I shot Armageddon Road in late May and early June of 2024. And then we went right into Mrs. Chang's. I think we had to bump it until July. And then, of course, we both had that deadline, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, that was crazy because even for me, the Duke of War post for us was pretty chill overall, but like pre-production and production was super intense. We shot in April, and then you and I were texting, and I was like, what are you up to? When are you doing your short? And you're like, my short? I'm doing a feature right now. And then the plan was to basically roll right into the short, essentially. And that's basically what happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I stole a lot of crew, thank God, from the feature and sort of pushed them over. And it was just crazy though, because I had no time to really prep because, the feature took a lot of time just because there was so much planning to do with, once you have miniatures, volume wall, and plates that we had to shoot, it became a whole different matter. And actually Mrs. Chang's was a relief because we actually didn't have that, like we had other elements, but we actually had real sets as compared to virtual sets and miniatures that were blown up to maximature. So that it was like, oh, good, actual humans in human-sized settings. That actually helped.
That's really interesting too, because both projects are wildly different. I mean, both in terms of format and like length. One's a feature, one's a short, but then one is a feature with miniatures, virtual walls, and then Mrs. Chang's, which is a DGC film, with actors, with real sets. I want to dive into all of that. I'd love to just put a pin in that for a second, though, and kind of give listeners a context of like who you are and sort of where you come from, because even your biography, you've directed 5 features, so many short films. People can learn more about them on your website. But let's go back. Like, you started as an entertainment lawyer and producer?
Well, it's been I actually keep talking about my failing upward, is sort of falling into the abyss. And my entire career has been one marked and catastrophe after another until this spot. So I feel that's how I functioned in my life. So I had started, when I was a young person, I thought I was going to be a musician. So I was classically trained in piano. I played French horn. There was a different goal in mind. And then I discovered the sewing machine, and I was like, I love making clothes. And so it pulled together my artwork with so I love fashion illustration. I loved everything about fashion design. So after my first degree, which was in my undergrad I have a Bachelor of Arts in English Lit with a minor in world religion, God knows. Then I ended up being in fashion design at what's Ryerson called now? Metropolitan, the Toronto Metropolitan University, what used to be Ryerson and what used to be Rye High, which is not Rye High anymore, is I was in the fashion design program for actually a semester. I can't even say it was a year. I dropped out after the first semester because I realized I did not actually like the industry nearly as much as I liked making clothes. So I flopped around for a bit, panicked, wrote the LSAT, went to law school, and I think I was the only fashion school dropout in law school. And then, so it's just like, this is off to a promising start, isn't it? And then I ended up articling at Insurance Defense, because that's what you think, that's where my life took me. And I would have been an insurance defense lawyer. But again, after another catastrophe, after articling, I didn't get kept on. So I panicked again. I ended up working as an intern at British Columbia Film, which is now Creative BC. They ended up offering me in-house legal counsel, and I helped put together the tax credit program. And that is how my film career started. And I started producing short films and stuff.
That's amazing. So before this, did you ever have the idea that you would be a filmmaker and a professional director and writer? And
No.
Not even as a kid growing up. Like, did you watch movies?
Yeah. I love films. I mean, I loved movies. I loved, again, I grew up with horror literature, and I do love quirky, weird, genre films. I love cult films. I grew up with all of the blockbuster days. That was me. I did love that. But I really thought that I was going to be in New York as a fashion designer. That was really where the goal was. So this is not it. And then when I went into the film industry, I thought I was very happy as a suit. You know what I mean? I just wanted to swan onto set with a coffee, walk around a little bit, go back to the office, you know what I mean? And talk to bankers. That was where my happy spot was. It was not, I was like, I trip over cords. I have no idea how to talk to actors. I do not know anything. The good thing is that I did take, my English Lit was my first degree, so I could read scripts. But I really saw myself as a Christine Vachon, you know what I mean? A creative producer, allowing and helping filmmakers make their films by picking great projects, putting together the package, financing. I loved all that part of it. I spent, I don't know how many years, countless years at markets, I was at the Marché, Berlin, the EFM, it was my circuit, AFM. That's what I did. I liked the sales. I liked going out there and just taking the meetings.
That was when you were at British Columbia Film?
Yeah, which is Creative BC now. I did that. And then I ended up getting headhunted by PricewaterhouseCoopers, where I was actually helping studios put together tax shelters. And so I was finance. I was not planning to do this at all.
I didn't know that part of your career. That's amazing. I bet that's so helpful now with everything you have going on. And yeah, as far as the independent side of things goes and how to put a movie together, you're the expert. You help design the tax credit system here. So that's pretty cool.
Well, it was interesting because it made me really understand how government programs are put together. It took 2 years. So any changes that happen, on a global industrial level only happens when there is enough outcry from the industry itself. And then there's actually a need from the government, some sympathetic ear in the government to say, yeah, this is actually something we want to do. And even then it took 2 years of me taking a lot of the float plane over to Victoria and having discussions with, there's your ministry, which, at that time we used to call a small business, tourism and macrame, but it was culture. So that was our ministry. And then you still have to pass everything through finance. And so, I just remember how much work there was and all the tasks, the task forces, just drafting legislation and regulations and that sort of stuff. I never thought I'd be I was a mediocre law student at best. I did not think I'd be actually working on putting together, tax law. So who knew?
So with everything going on right now, this is interesting. As far as, Trump and the tariffs and 51st state and elbows up and, Canada first and all of this like push to buy Canadian, where do you see this going right now from your perspective, as far as, even in just British Columbia, like we raised the tax credits to 40% here for below the line, labor. That's great, but that also helps the American production still. Is there any way we can right now, focus on pushing domestic production? How do we help indie filmmakers here in Canada? Is there a way right now?
I feel like, this sounds like a Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, right? So part of it is that we actually have more opportunity now that the whole system is pretty well fallen apart. Again, I've been indie probably my entire career, with the odd exception where I get hired occasionally as a hired gun. But my entire career, from when I started at BC Film, we were very much focused on developing and building the domestic industry. At that point, BC Film and the BC Film Commission were separate entities. I don't know if we know. Sorry, this is like one of those Wayne's Worlds. Like, go back in time. Remember when things were different. Back in the day, the BC Film was really very much about growing domestic industry. The BC Film Commission was very much about attracting American productions to BC to film here and to use this as. And we weren't fighting. We saw ourselves with different mandates altogether. BC Film was very much there to help support our, and again, domestic industry, meaning owned by Canadians, developed by, BC, owned by BC. And even then, we were still looking at Ontario as our biggest major competitor. And don't even talk to me about American productions. You know what I mean? And at that point, when I started in the industry, all we had were what I call the space operas. You know what I mean? Like, everything was on a spaceship and everything. And that's what indies were having to compete with. I was really lucky when I got into this industry. I was at a beginning time where we thought everything was going to turn around. It was the time when Lynn Stopkowitz had just done Kissed, and Mina Shum had done Double Happiness. And, there was Kitchen Party at Gary Burns. And, there was Scott Smith had just done Roller Coaster. There was this incredible groundswell of domestic, independent BC filmmakers that we thought this is going to be the thing that heralds who we are going to be. And for some, I don't know whether or not we just sold out or lost up the fight to production services, but we became a production services town. And it was like we chased the money, and we just kept chasing that money. And we really didn't see the value of our own filmmaking and our own copyright and owning our shows. And we lost so many theater screens along the way as well. We had the Caprice, we had obviously the Ridge, we had like all of these places where you could actually see, like the Royal Centre used to have 6 screens that were almost dedicated to Canadian film. So we actually had access to our own projects and our own screens. And now I feel like, between the streamers and, everything, and yeah, I mean, the bottom has fallen out in some ways. Like the old model of, VHS or DVD or however you would make some money back, having screens where you got to actually see Canadian projects. And now we're sort of, and we also got used to not paying for anything. So content is now free. So how do you put that genie back in the bottle? How do you actually make people want to see the things that we're doing? And that's where I am right now. And it's funny that you bring it up. Like, where do we go and what do we do? And right now, I really want our industry to be like, I want my friends to be employed. I want, there to be a healthy pipeline for this, because for me as an indie, I usually work off of things that fell off the truck. So the best thing that we have is like when you have a thriving production services industry, people can actually throw you bones every so often. Like our independent industry and our domestic films aren't strong enough right now to basically support and to be able to finance an entire, like all the post-production services and all the production services and that. So we do need that. But I want stuff to be able to fall off the truck for me. So
that's such an interesting way to look at it. I think you're so right, is that like, yeah, Vancouver is like 90%, maybe more service industry, right? And we get the big productions. But when you're talking to MBS or William F. White, or I guess now Sunbelt, and these rental houses, they do want to help indie film. They do want to give you a discount. They want nothing more than to help the domestic side. But they can really only do it when they're so busy because of the next Planet of the Apes movie, that's come to town, or a major franchise that does keep the lights on for them, cover the overhead, and then they can start kicking us deals. And that's, I think you're right, that's a healthy ecosystem for our small Canadian industries. And again, like Canada is the population of California. right? Like we have so few people here comparatively, as far as that goes. And so we do have to figure out a way to have the BC film industry work, the Ontario industry. Quebec is its own thing. They do a good job of funding their own domestic projects and supporting them. To your point about theaters and not having that part of the ecosystem around anymore, that's a really interesting point. I never thought about that because now it's just Cineplex and Landmark, right? And there's like the Rio, that's great.
Yes, the Rio, we have VIF, we have some, the Cinematheque, we have some local, but they're now like, we used to have a whole landscape that you could literally go see. Like I was thinking like, like I sometimes drive around and just see the ghosts of what that used to be, like where we used to see, like there literally remember there was a Capital 6 that was directly across from the Granville 7. So you could see films like, and they were kitty corner. There were so many screens to watch things. And it felt like, and I think about what the Ridge used to do, they would double bill. So you would go in for your cheap double bill. You'd have one new film and one old film. You'd have Spike and Mike's, Twisted Animation. They were event things that you went to. And so, now we have these ginormous TVs. We sit at home on our couches and the experience is very different. But that's not to say that there isn't an appetite for, I think, event screening. So, like we have to actually make it into some sort of event where people come out and there's something special about it, and I do think that there is something when you're watching something in a big crowd. Like I find that every time I go to a genre film festival, it reminds me of what it's like to watch something fun and something that you love with a crowd of people who also love it. And you're so into it and everyone is into it. And there's nothing like that experience when you're on the couch. That's so true.
That's so true. And I think eventizing, it's the way to go as far as, smaller indie theatrical runs. We just interviewed another filmmaker from LA, MJ Al Habib. He has a small theatrical run for his movie Plight, this really cool little dramatic thriller. But every city that they're going to, they're making, they have the step and repeat, the red carpet, and they're inviting people out and just creating a moment for people to be a part of. And I think that that's a really interesting way to do it. If you have a little bit of a marketing budget to make that happen, for sure, right?
Yeah. And even still, like I think about like how, our landscape, like how in Canada are we distributing our films? There's a sense like it's built into the telefilm eco world that it's like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. So you got your three cities, you dump them there, and that's somehow your theatrical release. And I think, isn't there a big country beyond? I'm from Brandon, Manitoba. Like we have theaters in the rest of the country. And what's interesting to me is, and we tried doing that a little bit. TIFF tried this for a bit, where they took their films on the road. But to me, like a lot of the smaller theaters in smaller centers, like it's like there's people out there who actually would love to come out and see films that aren't just the Fantastic Four or whatever it is, like in like that will play ad nauseum at their two theaters. If you actually have something where, you're actually getting people out and it's a community event, like having 70 or 80 people in a small community is actually much more impactful than, sometimes things get lost in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver all the time. So anyway, that's my thought. I'm going to take it on the road, man.
No, I love that idea. And you're right. Like filling an independent theater in a small town is probably more meaningful than, 50% capacity at a Cineplex, where again, people just don't really appreciate it and not having the event of it and it doesn't feel special.
No. And I think that there is something too about all of us as filmmakers actually building audience that is attached to our films. Going out there and making these community contacts and actually being part of the community and wanting to reach out to real audiences as compared to just thinking these are just numbers and people who are just going to download it. It's like, no, I'm actually a real person. You are real people. Like, how do we develop our audiences again? Even the Americans don't know how to do it anymore. They're just dumping the same stuff out there and, doing the same old. And you're seeing the numbers go down. Superman and Fantastic Four, I've seen have used a lot of social media to basically sell. So they're inundating my algorithm. Basically, they know that I don't trust them. So they actually keep pumping my friends who are posting about them. So it's like, oh, I don't know what you've done, but you've buggered up the algorithm because not everybody's watching that film. You know what I mean? It's really interesting what they're doing. And so my thinking is it's the same tools that are available to us as independent filmmakers. So we need to be using that.
Yeah, we've been talking to a lot of people lately about how, building your own audience. And, like one example is having a newsletter. The thing about a newsletter, and I'm trying this and I'm slowly, getting people to subscribe. But the idea is that you are talking about your career. It's a way to promote your work, share information, get people on your side to know who Karen Lam really is. And you have access to their inbox. That's so much better than a social media platform, right? A social media platform is basically like renting a house on land that isn't your own. Like the Facebook, Instagram, they could change the rules at any point. They could throttle your posts. They can make sure that nobody actually sees what you're posting. But a newsletter or website, ways that you can interact directly with your audience is key, and slowly building that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think about my favorite filmmakers like David Lynch and John Waters, and like the Americans used to do these cult things, but a lot of that back in the good old days is that they never cracked the studio system either for ages. So they would actually do the college circuit. So what's the difference with that? You've got your film, like basically you're doing a road trip of sorts. You're taking your film out there directly to the audience that's actually going to get it. Otherwise, we're like, to our earlier point online, like otherwise we're depending on film festival programmers, etc., to actually curate what people actually are going to want to watch or like. And we're looking for those garlands, and we're looking for that accreditation. I don't know what it is. Legitimacy. Like to me, we're doing it. I don't know why we're still looking for outside some sort of validation that says that you really are worthy of whatever it is, as compared to just
it's part of the Hollywood pick me culture. At the Hollywood level, at the studio level, that's exactly what it is. You write a script, you give it to your agent, and the agent sends it off, and you're basically waiting for the phone to ring for them to say you've been picked, that you will now have a job and move forward. And at this point, with the contraction that we're in and the industry in its current state, it is like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
Right. And I have friends right now that are still just writing scripts and waiting for those scripts to be picked. And I'm sitting here going like, well, on the TV side, I get it, because TV to a certain extent is just too expensive. At a certain level, it's too much to do independently. Not to say that you can't do it independently, and we can talk about that. But like TV is its own thing. But a feature, why are you just writing a feature and waiting for somebody else to make it when there are ways to make it yourself, even if it's just making a presentation piece or something like that, a sizzle reel to convince people to come on board? There are ways to just generate the work yourself and create an opportunity for yourself. And all of a sudden, you make a micro budget feature, a $250,000 feature, a $500,000 feature, and you become the bright, shiny thing that Hollywood all of a sudden looks at and says, hey, we want them. And then you get picked that way. But you've actually generated the work yourself and created the opportunity. And that's the way I'm looking at this entire industry.
Yeah. And even then, it's like, and when I did get picked, it was ultimately the real joy in what I do and what I create is actually those, what they call micro budgets, at 250, 500,000, that's where I usually sit. But that's actually where I'm very, very happy, because I get to pick exactly who I want to be in it, what I want to do with it. I'm not noted out of my head, because, like I do, obviously I've worked in television. I understand the process. I've worked on bigger level, like budgets, and I get notes, and I'm totally cool with that. But on my own projects, no, it's mine. It's like, I don't really care. There's a certain joy in that, because to me, the films that I found over the years that really resonated with people were not noted to death. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like they were just what they were, and the audience finds it. And what I find really gratifying after all these years is that, I had Mrs. Chang's actually was at the Portland Horror Film Festival, and I got a chance to talk to some, podcasters, and they were doing interviews. And there was a podcast, it's Antisocial, and she has watched Evangeline 6 times. And it's like, wow, that is really kind of awesome. Like, she remembered things that I didn't actually remember. So it's terrible. But, and it was really interesting too, because, for her, that world really meant something to her. And how often do you get that? It's such a privilege, I think, to be able to meet people who've watched your work over and over again, and they're actually your audience, and they follow you from place to place. And to me, like, that's not something, again, I'm not poo-pooing Tom Cruise. I mean, God, he's actually a real filmmaker. I actually have great respect for him. But it's the idea that people go to see Mission Impossible 18, and you've seen it, and it was a good way to pass the time. But the people who watch our independent films, these are films that are like that they discovered. It's theirs. It's meaningful for them. And it in a way that they actually also have access where they can talk to me about it. You know what I mean? I'm quite accessible as things go online. So there's an ownership that people have. And I think about, again, my favorite, independent filmmakers. And there is an accessibility where you're watching Divine and we all like, oh my God, the first time you see Female Trouble or Pink Flamingos, it was that. The first time you saw Eraserhead, the first time you saw, any of these films, they resonate in a way, it felt like you discovered it and it's your film. And no one told you that you needed to go out there and watch it. And it wasn't sold to you. It was yours. And that filmmaker is yours. And those films are yours.
Isn't that such a great feeling of because like we were talking about this the other day, we don't hunt anymore, right? Everything's just force fed to us. Like a streamer has it's all on TV. It's that feeling of going to the video store and spending an hour there looking through all the covers and going like, oh, this looks interesting. I've never even heard of this, but let's try it, right? We don't really do that anymore. Same thing with record stores. Like, I mean, record stores are still around, so that's the fun part of it, right? But that feeling of finding that gem and being like, this is mine. I've discovered this.
Like you found that weird bootleg that only you have. And there is something special about that for sure. And now there's times where I'm on those streamers and I'm literally just flipping through things. And it doesn't have the same feeling as I found this thing. It's like you're just flipping because it's there. It's accessible. It's free. And so we've devalued a lot of that. And even still, they're losing money. So like, again, how much is Amazon paying you to basically put your thing up on their, $8,000 or whatever it is? Like it costs you way more to make that. Why would you do it? That's a stupid model. Anyway, I didn't say that. Sorry, that's very loud.
Well, it is a stupid model. The model does not work. The streaming model, I mean, God, especially with the strikes a couple of years ago, how the legacy studios just hitched their wagon to Netflix, and that was just like driving everybody off of a cliff. Like, especially if you look at Disney, right? So they were making Marvel movies and they were pumping out, say, 2 or 3 Marvel movies a year, maybe even a little bit less than that. I'm talking about like up to 2018, 2019. Tickets, at least in Canada, are about $18 to $25 a ticket, depending on if you have the general admission or like the VIP. These movies are costing hundreds of millions of dollars, but tickets are at, let's just call it $20 in Canada, and they're selling out the theaters and they're making a killing. But how are you supposed to keep that up when you launch a streaming service at the time for like $9.99 a month or up to $13.99 a month and still try to produce Marvel quality content at that price point? Of course, you're going to lose money. It doesn't make it's simple back of the napkin math and it still doesn't add up. And so, of course, the streamers are losing money. Everybody lost their shirt. They don't know what to do. And we've taken away the model that actually worked for everybody as far as television goes, which was the cable model. Everybody along the chain of cable won, right? So actors got residuals, directors got residuals, writers got residuals.
Composers got residuals, like the SOCAN paid out, like everyone got, yes.
Everybody, yeah. There were longer episodes, longer season orders from between 15 to 22. Now we're getting down to seasons of like 6 episodes, kind of more of a British model, but it doesn't work this way in North America. So everything just fell apart. And now people are struggling. Streaming doesn't pay. Everything's front loaded. So you get a movie like The Gray Man that is awful and it costs $200 million. Why? Because everybody got their buyout, essentially, because they weren't paying residuals on all of that. So now everything is bloated. It looks bad. It's a mess. This is where we are right now.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. This has become a very uncheery podcast. But I do actually see that there is still audience out there. Because when I go to the film festivals that are like the horror festivals, there's still an audience that really cares about good story and good filmmaking. And they really want to be involved in that. And I know this from, I live in genre land. I don't know what other, I don't know how the rest of the world works, but I just know that I'm still looking for that. I still want to see good films. I still want to see something that moves me. And I do want to feel that ownership over, I found this film. I love this filmmaker. I follow them to the end of the earth. I still want to be in that spot. So I think that this is an opportunity when things fall apart and we, the filmmakers, are sort of like little cockroaches. We just have to survive this. And we've always lived off the things that fell off the truck. So as far as I'm concerned, as long as there's still some truck, and honestly, at this point, you can kind of do it with whatever you can do it. And as long as you have a creative bone in your body, you can still make those films and you will still be able to, it's just a different way of how are you going to actually make some money off of it? Like, how do you actually want to do this? And like, I've always looked at film as a business. If the market is going to pay $5 for a screwdriver, you can't then go make and design a $12 screwdriver. That's a terrible idea. You really do have to try to find out how you can make a $2 screwdriver, because the market is happily going to pay for your $5 screwdriver. So all of that is like to say that we have the technology in place. We have really well-trained crews. We are creative people. There is no reason why we can't be doing what we're going to do, and to actually do it for a price point that people are willing to pay for, and to participate in. I don't look at film as just me doing a thing and them receiving it. It really is a dialogue. I really feel like films that I have always loved, the films that I make and the films that I continue to be inspired by, are films where I feel like, as an audience member, I'm part of it. Like, we're in a dialogue. We influence each other.
I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I think that, going back to the beginning of our conversation about, like, we live in interesting times, and it's this Chinese curse, as you called it, like, the fact that Hollywood is completely falling apart is great for us, because it's showing the cracks in the system, and it's providing so many more opportunities if you're willing to just roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty to really get in there and make these things, right? Because I totally agree, people want really good storytelling right now. People want good movies, they want good music, they want good TV, and they're not getting it from the sources that they thought would be normally providing this. Yeah.
And I usually look at musicians. They're the canaries in the coal mine for me. I always see, what are musicians doing? Because the first thing, Napster was the one that hit them first, you know what I mean? And then Spotify and all of that. So their industry fell apart before our industry fell apart. So I always look at them as, what are they doing? And I'm seeing a lot of artists taking their songs off Spotify. Because it's like, well, why am I giving you my songs so that you can pay me pennies for so taking it off is like, well, how do we reclaim basically our content? If people don't I think they're going to find out soon enough that if you're not paying for content, you're not going to have good content, and the good content is worth paying for. So that's my, you know what I mean? Like, we never thought twice back in the day about shelling out for money for something that we loved. What we don't love doing is feeling like I'm paying $20 to go see some corporate thing that's been shoved down my throat. I feel very differently about paying $20 directly to the filmmaker, who basically gave me something that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and the same goes for authors as well, right? It's so true. We're just blindly paying $15 a month. Actually, it's probably closer to $20 now for Netflix. And what are we getting out of it?
I haven't watched for months. And it's funny because I have the subscriptions, you know what I mean? I'm not watching that way. But what I am doing is that I regularly go to VIF. I live right by VIF Theater. I go see all these obscure, and old classic films, because I love seeing them on the big screen. I love seeing it with an audience. So I am paying, I'm happy to pay my, $10, $15 a screening just to see it in a nice theater with other humans, and actually to enjoy it the way it's supposed to be enjoyed.
Well, okay. So talking about getting into all of this and having that dialogue with your audience, Armageddon Road, you're still in post, you're almost done.
So close. Oh my God, so close.
Let's talk about this. This is super exciting. Let's start at the beginning. How did you wrote this? How did you develop it? Let's go back to the beginning of this project.
Oh God, I wrote it in 2014. That tells you a lot. Yes.
And has it just been sort of percolating this whole time, or did you put it away?
Yeah. I mean, we tried for ages to get it off the ground, and I wrote it almost like a fever dream. And it was weird because it is it's the end of the world apocalyptic, based on the book of Revelation, but kind of and actually, this goes back to my undergrad. It's actually, in a lot of ways, it's a dialectic. So a dialectic being 2 points being argued. So it's almost like a two-person play. It's a road trip, which is what a road trip really is that it's like a before sunrise sort of discussion. But in this case, we're discussing the idea of man's free will, and basically that humanism idea that, and to me, that's the American dream, pitted against divine, just that idea that some things are ordained. And so my thought, this was actually my paper in undergrad, which was really, if God has omniscience and can see everything, do we as humans have a choice? A real choice, real free will, or is it all preordained? So that's really kind of it. And so there's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a little bit of a fever dream, but then the book of Revelation is also a prophecy that is a fever dream. So it kind of like mirrors on some level. So it's set exactly February 14th, 1976, which is when they were still doing nuclear tests in Nevada. So really the end of the world was them driving into what would have been a nuclear testing disaster, which again, that's the point of the road trip. Only our main character, Steve, does not know the woman that he's driving has been possessed by one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and he's heading where she's going is a mystery to him. So that is sort of the premise of it. And of course, I wrote this thing thinking that I was going to do a process trailer in Delta. That was not good. Like, you know what I mean? I had no way of actually doing this thing. And I thought, well, I can use some stock footage. I can, like it'll look like Vegas, but we had none of the technology. And it wasn't until I did a short film, 2023, after Bring It On, I had a chance to work in the volume wall. So we went to Luma Stage, and they were lovely there. And I was working with my actress, Ingrid Nilsson, and trying to figure out this volume wall. And I rented, my DP and I, Thomas Billingsley, we rented one of those small 360 cameras, mounted it to my car, drove around Hastings just to get that neon feeling. It was raining, so it got all smeary and weird. And so that was the first time that we tried working in the volume wall. And I put action in the volume wall. So I was like, oh, like there's a car behind. So we had to do all the stunt stuff as well. So it's just crazy because I think sometimes when people do volume wall stuff, they're using it as a static background or as a driving plate. And we're doing something completely different with it, where there's actual things are happening in the volume wall that we're now projecting, and our actors actually have to react to that. And so, but then I have to actually go and film almost like a B-side, like where you're doing all the stunt driving beforehand. So after doing Alt X, which I literally just put on YouTube right now. So I was looking at Luma Stage, and I was like, oh my God, I think I can finally do Armageddon Road after all these years, because this is possible. But I was like, I can't afford it. So it's not going to work. But Luma Stage, blessed, because our industry was quiet enough, I was able to actually work within a budget, and they were willing to actually have us in there just because it was so weird and so experimental. I didn't know how I was going to do any of these stunts. And they said, have you thought of doing miniatures? And I was like, I had not thought of doing miniatures. But my actor, Brian McCaig, his dad actually had the car. So it's so weird. I'd written this car. His dad had the car. I was sitting in like basically a field in Manitoba. And his dad was driving around with a miniature of the car in the car. So it's really funny because there's this like little, so it was sort of like, okay, so we have a miniature of the car in the car. And then Luma Stage said, have you met Gary Young? And I had not. And they said he's done. So I looked him up on IMDb, and I was like, I cannot afford Gary Young. He's Planet of the Apes. He's done all of these. He's on Yellow Jackets right now. I'm not like, he's impossible. So I talked to him, and he was like, no, I actually want to do independent work. And I was like, no, you don't. You haven't seen my budget yet. You're going to laugh. And he goes, no, I really want to do it. And so he was actually having to convince me that he was willing to do it. Here's my $2. Could you do it for my $2? And it was amazing, because then he was like, he looked at the model that we had, the 1/18th model of the Ford Galaxy, which is what it was. And it was like, then instead of me, having to go and look for these cars, I was literally on eBay buying these toy model cars at the 1/18th scale is what we actually ended up doing. So then I ordered them all for Gary, and then he worked his magic of just basically creating this world. He made he customized all the cars. They have like little working headlights. Like, it's insane what actually ended up happening. And so then, yeah.
It would be more romantic if they stayed together.
The door would not stay afloat.
It's a movie, not a documentary.
Are you insane, bro? It was a real life tragedy.
Why are you so obsessed with tragedy?
Here's an idea. Why don't the two of you take your hot takes to Pelleplat? They're holding a contest for people like you. Plus, there's cash prizes.
Game on.
So, who won?
Straight away. We both won. Yeah, we found our people.
Perfect. By the way, what about the end of Inception?
Don't even.
No,
I know you're
listen,
gonna start, but I
You need to look at
Pelleplat Writing Challenges, where passionate minds meet. Join today at pelleplat.com.
Cool. I love that you're using, a volume wall, which is brand new technology for filmmaking, and then mixing that with miniatures, which is like the oldest form of production design and special effects for film. That's brilliant. That's great. And how was this financed? Did you finance it yourself or?
Oh God, it's like I had interest from distributors, and of course they just take so long. And there's caveats. You know, the money is stuck to something else. So I was in discussions with distributors, and they were just pushing on, what's your cast going to be? What's this going to be? And I just thought, oh, it's another boondoggle. Like, I don't want to do this. I did this with Evangeline and with Curse of Willow Song. So I do know what this actually is, which is at some point, I just have to pull the plug and say, nope, I'm going to find by hook or by crook some money to do this sort of thing. And yes, it was sort of a combination of, I did do one budget thing. It's like I got paid, like I had Bring It On. So I had some director fees left over. I had I had some investments sort of from my late father who, there was this weird bond that literally was sitting in a cash thing that had just matured. So I felt like the world had basically said, here's a tiny amount of money. And I think it was like it's around 200,000, you know what I mean? Like I pulled and scraped sort of stuff. And with the tax credits and with deferrals, like this is what we would be able to do. And so it was a 18-day shoot. We shot a lot of it on our own. So those background plates can cost $10,000 for a set of plates, but I bought the camera. So I bought a 360 camera. It was on eBay. I think Thomas got it for us for $5,000. So it's like, okay, so it came with everything. And then, so we flew to Vegas and shot all of our own plates. And so we just rented a red car that was not even close to the Galaxy, but it was a red car, stuck the thing on top and drove around with it. And we rented a Ronin as well. So it had its little, it looked like Wally that was strapped around Thomas as we were driving. We shot our own plates. We went to the Nevada desert. We shot that. And later on, we went up to Kelowna to shoot more because we hadn't gotten all our stunts yet in, because we actually had a whole bunch of high speed car chases. And Kate Kroll, our producer, she's the stunt driver. I stunt drove for Vegas because of insurance. And then she stunt drove in Kelowna. And we then had to take all of that footage. Gary Shaw at Infinity had to start color correcting all of it before it went on the wall, which then so it was like a miniature thing. So it was really, it's crazy.
I love your mindset of like, well, if the plates are going to cost 10,000 and we get one, I'm just going to buy a camera for $5 and shoot everything I need. Brilliant.
And then I put it on eBay and I sold it for $4,500.
So you got all the plates for $500.
Yes. And we flew down to Vegas with everything on Kate's Avion points. So it was basically Avion points, and I had some residual money from Evangeline in American dollars because I'm still making residuals on Evangeline, which is awesome. Because I made that film for $250,000 in 2013. Uncorked is my distributor, and I still every 2 months get about a $400 US check. I put that in the account. And it's been going on. We're going on 12 years. Is that crazy?
Just have a little bit of money being raised, put that aside for the next project. I love that.
Yeah. And actually, Curse of Willow Song was filmed with all of the tax credits that we finally got back from Evangeline. So I paid back Evangeline, and anything above went into Willow. And then because of Willow, I got the job. I got Bring It On. So to me, that's like you know what I mean? That's my sale.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Like you make the one movie so that you can get the next movie as well.
And if you get the next movie, you know what I mean? It's like, and so Curse of Willow Song got me Bring It On, which is so weird. Like, and that got me a couple of other writing gigs. And I take all that money and I put it I live as cheaply as I can in Vancouver. I was very lucky to have bought my place before things start. Like my condo is paid off. So I literally am living off strata fees. So that's why I can live on tuna and strata fees, and that's what I need. And then everything else actually goes into my kitty of production funds. And so then, whether it's short films, which I still love, by the way, I love short films, and I don't want proof of concepts. I want a short film. I want a beginning, middle, and end, and I want a thing to be like what you did too with Dukapur. I want it to be like an actual film.
Yes, preach. I'm tired of short films that, like, if you're going to make a proof of concept, make a proof of concept. That's fine, but it's not a short film, right? It treat it differently, and yeah, make a short film that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's an arc to it. I totally agree. It's also great that you go back to short films after doing all of these features. You've made 5 features and you've made 10 shorts or more, and you just You're like, what am I doing today? I'm going to make a short film after this feature. I love it.
I love storytelling. And to me, I don't like some people, I think once you graduate into making a feature film, you're like, okay, I will never go back to a short film. But that's sort of like saying, if I only write novels, I never want to write another short story or a poem or, like they're different things. Evangeline is sort of a feature version of Doll Parts, but that's the only one that I've ever done that. I kind of like them to be their own thing. You know what I mean? Like the short is the idea that I don't want to expand any further because I might as well just go back to the beginning. Whereas I love writing, there's different, again, sometimes some ideas are feature length, some ideas are TV series length, and some are just, it's just a thing that it's an itch that I wanted to get rid of.
Yeah, I'm often asked about the Doukhobor in terms of like, because I'm trying to set up a feature right now and things are moving forward and the question is, well, is it a feature version of the Doukhobor? But I'm like, no. The Doukhobor's done. Like, it's a short film, and I told that story. I don't need to tell the feature-length story of that. I also personally don't want to spend like 2 or 3 years of my life working on a feature-length version of that movie because I've already spent a year or more, working on it as a short, and like it did its thing. I thought it was effective. I'm super proud of it.
It's gorgeous. It really is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And it sets up you as a director. I think that out now, I think if people ever questioned what your aesthetic actually is and how you want to tell stories and how you work with actors and how you're going to build suspense, and that's all answered in your short. So that's really cool.
Thank you. I mean, it has been effective so far as like meeting with investors and getting people convinced that, these guys know how to make something look really great on a budget. That's the argument that we're trying to make, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. And short of that, go make it, whatever it is, just go make it on whatever. Like that's my usual thing. It's like sell a kidney, because on Evangeline, I didn't even have that nest egg. I literally took a credit line out on my condo because that's all I had. So yeah, people say don't do that. But do you know what I learned? One of the things I learned was I did my first short film was for the NSI, the drama prize. I got that, which is awesome. And then I got into I was watching some of your other podcasts, and I also did not go to film school, as you can tell. I went straight into industry. All of my training, I've been very fortunate, has been through sort of industry programs. So I was in the NSI's, the National Screen Institute's Drama Prize and the Totally Television program. I think they've revamped into, I'm not sure what the program is called now. I was in Women in the Director's Chair. I have done and I've since mentored at the Whistler Film Lab and, basically wherever people need me, I step in and I do a guest spot every now and then. But that's how I've gotten most of my training. And most of my training has been on the job. So I've been also really lucky where my true crime training was literally Lynn Booth at Make Believe Media saying, do you like true crime? And we'd gone out for coffee. She says, do you want to shadow me? Do you want to try it? And I was like, I'd actually just shot my short film, The Stolen. It's a 5-minute dark fantasy fairy thing. She saw it. She thought it was beautiful. And she said, could you bring that aesthetic to the true crime show? I stupidly, not knowing, said, sure. You can't do that. Anyway, but I didn't know enough. So I wasn't trying to I wasn't trying to sell her in a terrible sort of way. But she hired me and I learned on the job. So I was trained to do the true crime writing and the thinking basically by the executives of Investigation Discovery in the US. So because it was the US version of it. So you're getting all your notes directly from the executives, and we had an executive producer. So this idea of you having to observe is just, okay, I say that that's a little BS, and I get it, why we're doing all these observer mentorship things. But every job I've ever had has literally been them throwing me in the deep end and saying sink or swim and swimming. You either trust me or you don't. Hire the people around me if you're worried about me to make sure that you're taken care of. You have to trust your heads of department. You have to trust your producer. You have to trust the people that are going to support this person. But having me following around like a little duckling with a clipboard is not actually giving me the ability to do the thing.
I'm going to pile on in a second here because my issue with the director observer, director shadow is right now in Canada, the Directors Guild, at least, is saying is having directing members shadow other directors on these shows. Okay, fair, but they're already directing members. They got in by directing a feature film. They've had a film play at a festival. They are directors already. What the program should be, in my opinion, is you're actually bringing people up who aren't directing members yet to shadow directors onto that show and then give them a shot later. Right, that's more how the American system works. At least is a lot of the director shadows aren't already TV directors shadowing other TV directors. No, you go in for a meeting and you pitch on how you direct that show, and you get the job or you don't. But there's already an inherent trust in there that, like, you've directed things. We know you know how to direct things. Can you direct our show? Tell us how you would direct a show. And I'm talking to somebody like in your position, Karen, that you've clearly made so many things that the DGC anyway should be looking at lower level directors, up and coming emerging directors. And I'm saying this because I talk to them and I ask them, hey, can you guys help me out for shadow positions? And they're like, no, we only do that for directing members. I'm like, but how do I become a directing member if I don't get to shadow directors and actually get the directing job?
So I don't understand that either. Yeah. For you, like, you're right. It should be for ADs and basically with other department, like, scripties, anyone who actually wants to take that next step up. If I'm supposedly already a directing mentor, how does it look to the crew when I am literally shadowing? Do you know what I mean? Like, there is something, the optics of it are kind of, ugh. I'm sorry. Like, I probably should not be quite so stuck up with these things. But what I've always found, and I have a love-hate relationship with, how Canadians have been subservient to our American producing side of things. But as what I've discovered in my directing side is that I've been hired again and again directly, like, off the streets from American studios and producers and executives in a way that Canadian television or Canadian producers are always like jump through these 10 hoops just so that you can actually, get the chance to watch us do the thing that you're actually supposed to be doing. And I'm like, oh, and yet, it just feels a little bit like, well, hire me or don't hire me. Like, again, Lynn Booth on the True Crime series literally was, I haven't done it before. I literally shadowed her on half an episode, but I was already story editing. And then literally the next episode I took over.
But that's how it should be. That is exactly how it should be. In Canada, I feel like it's just for the sole purpose of having a program to say that we're helping people. And I think there are a lot of great programs out there. And like you said, you learn from many of them. But sometimes Canada is just about, it's kind of the motion of making films rather than the action of actually doing something. And so, oh no, we're helping people. We're giving them shadow opportunities. Okay, so where's the opportunity for them to actually direct down the road? Oh, there isn't one because we don't produce enough TV. We don't produce enough movies to give people, the opportunity to direct these things. And so it's this self-perpetuating, pat on the back, and it's not actually helping anybody. And so, yeah, I think the Americans treat it more like a business, where Canada treats it more like a film club. And if you're not in the club, good luck.
Yeah. I think with Americans too, there's a sense that they want to be the ones discovering the talent. It feels to me like there's they have the open for business sign, and we kind of have the, oh no more room at the table. Like you guys can stand and watch us eat, but you actually don't get to take part in it. And, you get the scraps at the end, which is not, again, it doesn't help me in television land, and it doesn't help me in my directing. And so I get why, but and I found this as a mid-level female director, is that there was a lot of programs, a lot of opportunities to, again, we're mentored out the yin yang, and you don't hire us. So it's like, oh God, I've got another mentor and I'm mentoring. And so like, now we're all mentoring. And so I was like, okay, so now we're just all showing each other what we'd be doing, but who's doing anything? Just go out and make the damn thing. Your
mentee is going to end up mentoring you. And it's just everybody's mentoring each other.
Exactly. And I get it. And all the money's going into these programs of mentoring, and we're talking at length about our films and our and the scripts. And I do, again, I've given notes on scripts. I've received notes on scripts, and I get that portion as well. But sometimes you just got to go out there and make the thing, and sometimes I look at the scripts and I'm like, yeah, but we're going to solve that in production. And I know sometimes we can't solve it in production. I'm talking to another writer, so you know what I'm talking about. But sometimes it's like, okay, that looked great on paper, but it doesn't work. And other times you're like, who's the people giving me these notes? Like, how often have you been on set actually having to then struggle with your material in the edit suite because you didn't, I think I've learned more about writing and directing in the edit suite with my editor and trying to figure out what the hell I did to begin with than I did actually, through any program. You learn to live with your mistakes and to fix your mistakes, and you won't do it again the next time. But that comes with going through post, and that's why I spend forever in post. It really is my learning curve.
Yeah, and so like all of that to say is it's just about going out and doing it yourself. I think that's ultimately the point here, right? Like programs help. Don't rely on them. Don't rely on the soft money either, because like going back to the pick me culture, at least my perspective is Telefilm, Creative BC, the grants, they're great and they do uplift voices and they tell stories that need to be told. But if that's your only way to make the movie, don't let it be, right? Find another way to make it, because like even with our film, like we didn't get Telefilm, we didn't get Creative BC. I get it. It's not that type of film. But if I only relied on that, then all of a sudden you're allowing the independent industry to create a pick me culture for yourself, right? And be a part of that. So don't succumb to the pick me culture. Just go out and make the thing yourself, like Karen Lam does.
And Robert Rodriguez, like El Mariachi, like that whole thing, like that was so pivotal in my filmmaking career, because I came of age in that 90s period where everything was just possible. And there was like Swingers. It was like all these films that were like, oh my God, the Americans were doing it.
Nolan too, following $6,000 film, and now he's Christopher Nolan. But all of these guys went out and just made a movie themselves for nothing.
I was thinking Doug Liman. I was thinking like just all of those films, Bottle of Rocket, like the Wilson brothers. You know what I mean? Like all of these films were just, and to this day, like you see someone like Kevin Smith, and he's still doing his own thing. Like, he was Clerks. He's right in our backyard. Why aren't we doing that? He should be, you know what I mean? Like these are our heroes. I'm not doing these things so that I can get picked. It's lovely to get picked from a studio. And, my hilarious thing with that job was actually that I had no idea I was actually interviewing for a studio film, because I am very bad at reading things. You did your research. I don't read past my agent's first line of, here's a script. I'm like, okay. And I actually told her, I'm teaching the Whistler Film Lab. I said it with such like cockiness. I'm actually embarrassed for my past self. Whereas like, I need the weekend to read the script because I'm really tired. I'm on Zoom, right? And she's like, okay. I read the script and I was like, it's a cheerleader horror. What about me says cheerleader horror? She goes, could you just talk to the LA producer? And so, she sets up a meeting with him, and he was like, do you know what Bring It On is? And I was like, no, that's a really bad name for a thing. He goes, no, could you just watch the film? Like I really want you to interview for it. And I was like, Then I watch it. It's a great film. I was like, oh, crud, it's a thing. And then I see that my invite for the interview is from NBC Universal. And my brain was like, what part of the interview? Like, I'm flipping through my email going, what part did I miss? Right? I had nothing prepared. So I did a dumbass thing, but that's just me.
But you still got the job.
I did, but that's by hook or by crook. I don't know. They had seen Willow and they really liked it. And they said, how the hell did you do it for like basically a craft service budget? And I said, yeah, it's doable. And so, but again, it's really hard because again, we get to work with, again, the stuff that falls off the truck. We have incredible talent in our little sector of the woods because of the production services side of things. We do get access. We have people like Tug Phipps who actually, at Sunbelt, who is literally like, because I've made this, I can offer you this. And, you go and pick up your equipment and you think it's so much. And then you look over and there's this like just conveyor belts of stuff going out for something bigger, and yours is like, this will fit in the back of my truck.
Well, yeah, and again, shout out to Tug. He's helped thousands of filmmakers here, and is just an integral part of the indie industry here. Now that we're talking about this, like I do think it's important to like, you've done a studio movie, right? The Bring It On franchise. There's nothing more, like there's a Back to the Future poster behind me, right? There's a Jurassic Park poster here. Like I want nothing more than to direct a big studio movie. That's my dream since I was 5 years old, to direct one of these things. That's not to say that like that's the only thing I'm focusing on now. I would, if Amblin called me tomorrow and was like, do you want to make a movie? Of course I would say yes. Are you kidding me? But all of that to say, the indie side of things is so important too. And I think it's about finding that balance, right? Between how do I make this movie for $200,000 or $1 million, or, raise a little bit of money to get this thing going, but still having your sights set on that. And it's okay to want to do both. And I think like, I guess the actor equivalent would be like George Clooney does a few Nespresso commercials, makes millions of dollars, and then just decides to like direct obscure movies because he doesn't need that money. Maybe, well, he's now like a billionaire, but that's not the best example, but the point is like make a bit of money, support yourself, treat yourself the same way that the Vancouver film industry has been working, which is we need the big service productions so that the indie ones can thrive and be supported by the organizations that are here.
I agree. Yeah, that's how it is. And again, that whole, I'm glad you used that term because I didn't know how to use it, the pick me culture, but it really is this, we have this constant sense of like, if I do this, they'll pick me. If I like basically me being really great at doing this indie thing means that at some point someone better will pick me. You know what I mean? Like your validation and who you are and how good you are all is riding on someone else out there. I just don't want to live my life in that sort of way. And I get how our entire industry has basically set itself up to be like someone else has to validate that this is cool. And I just think, why can't we be like Seattle was in the grunge days where you just did your own shit and then hopefully, you know what I mean? Like it's just like then you're doing your thing and you know other people decide that you're cool and that's awesome, but you were already doing your thing. You know, like you're already making the films that you want to make, and this is actually you're good enough, right? And not just good enough. You're actually happy with that, with what you've chosen.
Yeah, if you're making something for somebody else to determine whether it's good or not, that's probably not the right way to go about it. But if you're making something because you think it's good enough, other people will probably think it's good enough because you know you'll find your audience.
Yeah, like what do you want to see? What would make you say, "Oh my God, that's really awesome"? You know, like that's usually how I approach most things. Which is, again, it's a little bit. This is probably why I'm not so well hired. It's like I get hired every so often, but then after that, I'm like, was that fun? Was that awesome? No, I don't know. And you know what? That's another thing too, that the studio did hire the very most experienced people around me because, you know, I think there was a certain amount of like, we might not trust her. And so it was funny because I think I saw a shot of me on location, like on location scout, and I'm surrounded by respectable white men. And then there's me. And I'm like, if I were to look at that photo, I don't know that I would pick me as the director in that photograph. Be like, oh, don't know if I trust that one. I think she's just there to take notes. But anyway, it's like but there's all your stereotypes and stuff like that. But you know, it is. But you know what? That was Universal 1440 when they hired me. I was the first female director in 200 plus films and the only female director in the entire franchise of Bring It On. It's weird. It's a weird thought, right? And I think that even at the end, they had a whole bunch and they whittled it down to 5 that they interviewed. And I didn't know that because if so, I would have taken it much more seriously than I did. I think it was between me and another female director who was had done a lot more episodic television, and I had none. So I think that they were literally saying, well, we're either going to get this type of film or we're just going to take a chance on this weirdo. And they did. And yeah, and I learned a lot. Like it was a good learning experience as far as things go.
Yeah, with your horror background and bringing vision and perspective and a voice, you know, to the film and something offbeat, because the movie itself is like not like any other Bring It On movie, right? It's
No, yeah, exactly. And it's funny because even despite all that, they wanted it to be PG-13. So it's like, so that's a hard balance. And the script that they gave me was a wonderful and awesome script, but it was also very R. Because I actually, one of the things that pro tip, or is not, maybe not a pro tip, I am not good with, and you know this from our co-pitching of the DGC Greenlight Award, I am not good with visuals. Like, as in for a very visual director, I don't actually pitch with a lot of visuals. In fact, I pitch with nothing. And so even when I did my, interview pitch with Universal NBC, I didn't have any visuals at all. It was a conversation. It wasn't me pitching the idea. It was more me trying to find out, what do you guys want? You know what I mean? Like it was a conversation. And what was interesting was that I watched, the DGC had a how to pitch, do your pitch deck sort of conversation and a workshop. They had a filmmaker on who had actually done one of the Bring It On pitches, like for the job I got, which was really weird. But what's interesting was that because they had locked into the visuals, there were things that the executives specifically didn't want in the horror. So sometimes I don't know whether or not this is whether it's a good tip, like it's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because again, some people pitch much better with a visual element behind them. Some people don't. I don't. I have to, as you can see, I have enough technical problems logging into this. I do not want to be then struggling with, other things on top of it. But what I really found was that if executives see something in the pitch deck that they hate, then that's actually going to be sitting there, and it has nothing to do with what you say. They just didn't like, in some cases, like I remember one DP came in with a pitch deck and there was like a mauve lighting. Who knew? There was one executive on our board that says, I hate purple. Well, okay, well, we could have not had purple, but they were fixated on how much they hated purple. And it's like, okay, now the entire interview went for nothing because all I can remember is that purple. And it's a weird, like it's a weird thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a fine line to walk because it's more for them to say no to. But then on the flip side, like some people just don't have an imagination and they need to have a visual, and you have to beat them over the head with it sometimes of just saying, no, this is what the movie's going to look like. Some of it's out of your control, but like you are so good at pitching and building an image in the listener's mind when you were pitching. Like, I totally agree that your pitch for Mrs. Chang's was so good without a visual. The visual that I had in my head because of your description was so much stronger, I think, than anything you could have, put up on screen in that way.
I think that's something that I've actually thought about as well, because when I was thinking about bringing it on, like some of the things that the executives, once I asked them questions, like it became a conversation where I was like, well, what do you think about this versus that? I realized actually, if I just read the script, I would have gone off in a totally different direction. Like at one point I asked them, like, your core audience for the cheerleaders is like PG-13 or has been, that's been, and they said, yes, it's female, it skews this. And I said, but you're doing a Halloween special. The script is quite bloody. Where do you want me to go with it? Is it like really gory or is it fun? And they all said in unison, fun, PG-13, fun death. And I was like, okay, so if you had come in with a pitch deck that had blood all over it, you would not have got, like, there's no way. That was not what they wanted. They wanted something that felt more like Simpsons Halloween special, like a little bit fun, not that, and meant for girls. And so then all of a sudden you're coming in with something. And then the other thing that I didn't realize when I was talking to them was like, I had done a little bit of research onto like cheer culture. So I was diving deep into that. And I was like, like I have this image in my head of cheerleaders being like size 0 blondes that are like these little tiny girls. And they were like, no, we want to actually reflect cheer culture. One of the things that we want to do with this film is to talk about like sort of like more body positivity. And so, of course, if you had actually done a pitch deck that had the old cheerleader look, that would have completely offended at least half of the people on basically the firing squad. So it's interesting because, again, if you had read the script, which they gave me, and based it on that and did a pitch deck based on what they had developed for 2 years, that was actually not what they wanted. And it was really an interesting learning experience for me.
That's very interesting to keep in mind.
I'm not saying that's the only way to do things, because lots of people we see like my pitch deck got me my job, but I would actually say my pitch job, my lack of pitch deck got me my job. So so it depends on what your pitch skills are or otherwise. And I know that right after Bring It On, I got hired by 20th Century to kind of go up the ranks, with a franchise film that they wanted to. And the whole thing, every pitch I did was oral, no visuals, no materials. I got better and better at these 20-minute, like, let's walk you through the entire story type pitches. And it was really interesting that that's how the studios were doing things. And yet we're constantly being told that you need this sort of pitch deck and that sort of stuff. So I don't know. My own experience has been the opposite. But again, I haven't been given $100 million franchise. So, maybe that's different.
Well, not yet.
Yet.
So, okay, look, I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours, and that's usually kind of what happens whenever we grab coffee.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No. This has been so fun and so great, but we are nearing the end. And so usually what we do with our guests is we ask if there's one piece of advice that you can give up and coming filmmakers, people that are maybe just starting out, what would that be? What's Karen Lam's advice for up and coming filmmakers?
Oh, man, I honestly think that, oh no, now I'm panicking. What advice would I give? It really is about going out there and just making it. And I think, don't think too hard about branding yourself. Like, there was a lot of periods where people were like, well, who are you? What are you doing? The more films you make, and you just have to keep making them, the more your voice comes out in that. And don't, like, as in what I try to do from film to film, which is why I've got 10 short films, a web series, and 5 features, is that maybe the voice comes out, maybe the brand eventually like solidifies, but not because I tried to do that. It really was about learning and experimenting and really pushing, like, just have fun and make films and tell stories, and don't put all your faith in yourself. Don't give that to someone else to basically make that decision for you.
No, that's great. And last question, where can we find you online?
Oh, I am revamping my website, so I'm very happy with it. So you can go to www.karenlamfilms.com, and at least most of it is up there. You can actually watch every short film is up there. The only stuff I'm still working on right now is the web series, but all the features, where you can watch them, where you can buy, like where you can rent, everything's up there.
Oh, that's great. And are you on Instagram too?
Okay, now you had to ask this, right? I am my cats, so therefore it is me, but it's actually my cats, and it's it's Mateo _ Sophia with an F _, and it really is my cat's account, and I am very embarrassed. So, but it's been 10 years.
Well, the cats are very, very cute.
I just pop in. I'm the human in it, and I stupidly 10 years ago decided to write it from Mateo's perspective, and so I can't break because it's been 10 years of this, and so it's where I actually have my cats and my clothes and everything I knit, my textiles. It's a whole other matter. It's embarrassing.
Well, you'll put your website in the show notes. People can check out your work at KarenLamFilms.com. Karen, this has been so fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.